Hello class, this lecture is called the Spanish History 101. Specifically, we are going to be looking into the Muslim occupation and the beginning of the exploration period. To begin with, we need to understand that what is called Spain today. It's a place that has been explored, has been conquered, and has been invaded by many different people. For example, the Phoenicians, which is people from Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. The ancient Greeks also invaded Spain. The Carthaginians from Northern Africa or the Middle East. Of course, the Romans from Italy. The Visigoths from Germany. And finally, the Moors from Northern Africa. Therefore, Spain is a place of many invasions, is a place of many conquests, is a place that has lots of history before the time when Spain comes to the Americas in 1492. We are going to talk about the period in which Spain was under the Roman Empire. In the period that Spain was under the Roman Empire, Spain was known as Spania. And the story goes like this. In the year of 395 of our current era, Roman Emperor Theodosius decides to divide the Roman Empire into two for his two sons. He divides it into the Western and the Eastern Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire will be divided into these two for some time. But in the year 410 of our current time, the Western Roman Empire, which is where Spania is located, it's invaded by the Visigoths, which is German people. By 1456, most of Hispania is controlled by these people, by Germans. And they named this place the Kingdom of the Visigoths. By 476, the Western Roman Empire collapses. Romulus Augustus is the last emperor of this place. And this begins what we know as the Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages, the kingdom of the Visigoths, or Spania, practices the Roman Catholicism. The capital of this place called Hispania is Toledo. The culture that is practiced in this part of the former Roman Empire, it's still Roman cultural practices. The language spoken is Latin. However, in the year 711 of our current era, the Visigoths have a battle against Moors or Muslims. This is known as the Battle of Guadalete. The Battle of Guadalete is lost by the Visigoths. And at this point, starting in 711, the Moors or Muslims from northern Africa take control of Spain or España, and they rename it Al-Andalus. This is where we start this history of this beautiful place. And all over Spain today, especially in Cordoba, you can see the influence of this culture from northern Spain. Here is a quote from the time period that discusses the takeover of the Iberian Peninsula, also renamed Al-Andalus by Moors. You may pause this part of this video so you can take a moment and read what this quote discusses about this experience. So from the year 711 to the year 1492, Moors have control of what is known as Spain today. And they leave a big influence in everything that is part of the culture of Spain, of the Iberian Peninsula, and obviously because part of the culture is language, also the Spanish language. During this period of occupation by the Moors or the Muslims, Spain is influenced in great ways by this North African, Middle Eastern culture. Moors bring to Spain new scientific techniques that helps Europe come out of the Dark Ages a little bit later, and helps Spain and other parts of Europe advance their science, chemistry, physics, mathematics, geography, and philosophy. Because the Moors are in Spain for centuries. So Al-Andalus suffers this occupation, but at the same time, there is great progress that comes out of this, that influences not just Spain, but other parts of Europe, including the era of navigation. The connection that these Muslims have with the rest of the world also influence or open up a bridge of understanding between Europe and the rest of the world. One of the things that Moors emphasized and invested a lot in the Iberian Peninsula is public libraries. It's important to understand that in the European world of the Middle Ages, education was not something that was available to most people. Therefore, most people did not know how to read and write, including kings and queens and noble people. There were only a few people that knew how to read and write in these kingdoms, because that was not important. For Moors, education was something that was important. And because in Europe, education or being literate was not that important, or that was not something that was available to the majority of the population, Europe only had 2 universities, while the Moors built 17 universities in the Iberian Peninsula, including public universities. For example, you have a picture here of the Public University of Cordoba, Spain, that before 1000 of our current era had more than 600,000 manuscripts that would be equivalent to books today. Cordoba, Spain would become the capital of Al-Andalus, or Spain under Moor control, and this would be also the most modern city in Europe. This place is described as a place where the streets were well paved and there were sidewalks for pedestrians to walk on. The cities were lit up with lamps for hundreds of years, something that was not existent in cities like Paris and London until a little bit later. Cordoba was known to have 900 public baths, which means that North Africans were rather clean people. If you visit Spain, make sure that you visit Cordoba. In Cordoba, you can find the Great Mosque of Cordoba, or La Mezquita. This is one of the greatest architectural wonders of Spain, but also Europe today. You can admire the architecture of this place and much other architecture that exists in Spain today. Unfortunately, or because of national pride, the culture of Spain does not emphasize or take too much pride in this. There are actually festivals that question a lot of this history and show much tension with a lot of this history. But this history is important, and it's understandable that people in Spain do not like this history too much in general terms, but it is part of their history. In terms of other influences, the Spanish language is influenced by Arabic. Music is influenced by Arabic. Many instruments, including the guitar, are from Arabic or Middle Eastern influence that came in through this time period. And also math is something that was brought in by this culture, including the Arabic numbers that we use today, which replace the Roman numerals or numbers that we use, or maybe you learned in school earlier on in your life. Other things that also influence this time period include crops that did not exist in Europe at this time, and these crops include citrus plants like oranges, lemon, things like peaches, apricot, figs, sugarcane, dates, ginger, and pomegranate. Cotton, silk, and rice. A lot of these things were brought in by this culture. Africa, specifically this area of Europe, was a place that was very knowledgeable of the rest of the world, and they brought the compass with them, but they also brought maps and information that connected Europe to other places like China, India, and the Arabic Peninsula, that allow Europe to advance in exploration and eventually influence the rest of the world. It's important to understand all of this history because this is going to influence world history in years to come. As a way for the European Christian kingdoms to fight this occupation, which is what is left over from the Roman Empire, scattered kingdoms. The Roman Catholic Church out of Italy, or what would become Italy, begins a period which is called the Crusades. The Crusades take place from 1095 to about 1291, in which the Roman Pope declares war against non-Christians. And in these wars, you have Christian kings fighting against Islamic kings or rulers, but also against other groups that were not Christian, like Jewish, people that were traditional believers, or people that did not practice anything close to Western religions. Crusades were not only wars of religious ideology, but they were also military expeditions for wealth, resources, political and religious influences across Europe and the Middle East. The exploration of the New World was the continuation of the Crusades or another crusade. These crusades created a strong separation between Catholics and Orthodox Christians some years later. In Spain specifically, closer to 1492, Spain, as part of the continuation of the Crusades, pushes forward with policies to reconquer Spanish territory from this Muslim occupation. This period is known as the Reconquista or the Reconquest, and a policy that is applied is called limpieza de sangre. Limpieza de sangre means cleansing of blood, and this is something that it's a policy but becomes literal, meaning that people who are not willing to convert into Christianity will be put to the sword. This is the period of the Spanish Inquisition, in which there was very little tolerance for anybody that questioned the ideas of the church and the Bible, people that questioned the authority of the church and the kings, and a time in which the Iberian society was divided between Cristianos Viejos and Cristianos Nuevos, meaning old Christians, traditional Christians, versus people that in theory were given a chance and opportunity to convert into Christianity so they could join Iberian or Spanish society. Obviously, many people who are not traditionally Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and others were not okay with this, and they were not willing to convert. And for that reason, they end up being tortured under the Spanish Inquisition, expelled. They end up losing all of their wealth, or they end up leaving by choice out of Spain. Many Jewish people, Muslims, and others end up leaving because of this religious intolerance of Spain. The seal that you see here in this slide is the seal of a unified Spain. This is also a symbol that you see in the Spanish flag today. So the Spanish flag marks this historical period in their flag today, where all of these different symbols that you see here come together, and these symbols represent the different kingdoms of Spain. Spanish Inquisition is something that takes place from the year 1478 to 1834, which means that this starts in Spain, but eventually spreads into the Spanish colonies. The Spanish Inquisition was something that was headed or done by the Roman Catholic Church. When this Inquisition began, Spain was a multiracial and multi-religious place, but the Roman Catholic Church was not willing or interested in allowing for non-Christian, non-compliant religious practices to exist in Spain. They call this the Santa Inquisición, and that means that they had a board of people or people in the church that made decisions about who was good and who was not good and who needed to be punished, in some cases even tortured or burned at the stake for practices that were not complying or were not okay with the Catholic Church. Once Ferdinand II and Isabella I married, the Spanish Inquisition took a whole different level, and it becomes extremely violent and discriminatory against many people. The Spanish Inquisition saw the creation of autos de fe, or acts of faith. This is all done in the name of the church, in the name of God, and they are doing good in their minds, but they do cause a lot of pain and suffering. Here in San Diego, California, at Balboa Park, at the Natural Museum of Men, I believe every year they bring some of the duplicates of instruments of torture that they use in the Spanish Inquisition. You should look into that, and maybe you can go and see for yourself the kind of stuff that they use. Again, a Grand Inquisitor or a judge under the Catholic Church was the person that made these decisions. And I'm sorry if this is triggering any of you, because this is a very violent period. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish and Muslim people were expelled from Spain during this period, or in many cases they end up leaving because they cannot stand the intolerance of the church. Spanish Inquisition eventually turned on the Roman Catholics. So it started with people that were not Christian, not Catholic, but eventually even Roman Catholics became victims of this. And obviously, when this is brought to the Americas, into the Spanish colonies, native people who practice indigenous spirituality or beliefs end up becoming victims of this Inquisition. And this is a lot of torturing that is brought into the Americas. The Spanish Inquisition was suppressed or slowed down, and eventually it stopped by the 19th century, in the 1800s, closer to the times of independence of many of these countries. But it lasted for a very long time, and many people ended up paying with their lives for their beliefs. At the end of this lecture, I have a video about this Muslim occupation, and you can watch it and understand and learn about this historical period. Again, if you look at the Spanish flag, the symbol that they have in the middle of the flag, it is the symbol from this last period of Spanish history. I hope that you enjoyed this lecture and that you can connect the dots and understand how all of these influences the next period of history. Take care, and I will see you in the next lecture.